Hey guys, welcome to the second part of the Ruby introduction. And today we are going to cover what are arrays. It's going to be a quick episode. Let's go ahead. So in the last episode, we did go over variables, right? We covered them, we played with them, and we thought that they were very useful. But the problem with variables is they can only hold one value. So what happens when you actually need to hold a lot of value, when you're dealing with a lot of data on your app? Well, you will need arrays. And basically arrays is just a list of values. So it's very useful when you're dealing with a lot of data. Now let's go ahead and just define our first array. Let's call it fruits and give it a list of fruits that we enjoy. Apple, orange, and cherries. Great, now we just defined our first array. Let's go ahead and print it out and see what happens exactly. How does Ruby see an array? So if we run the file, we can see that Ruby is going over each element of the array, apple, orange, and cherries, and prints them out. So instead of defining three different variables, one for apple, one for orange, and one for cherries, we just defined one array and gave it three different values, which is much more efficient. It takes less memory and it goes much faster. So now, an important thing to note at that stage is that you can give an array pretty much any data type. So you could give it an integer here. You could even give it a boolean. And actually, an array can even hold other arrays nested inside of them. So here I could have another array of different things. But that's for a bit further. So let's go back to our first example. And so you see that Ruby just printed out each element of this array. But what happens if I only want to print the first one, or the last one, or even the second one? Well, you can do that, of course, and the way to do that is just to specify which index of the array you want. So arrays, they are storing the values with indexes, which are basically like IDs. And the weird thing about arrays is that it doesn't start at 1, but the index actually starts at 0. So apple would have an index of 0, orange would have an index of 1, and cherries an index of 2, and so on. Which means that if I want to access apple, I would need to tell fruits to give me the index of 0. And it's very simple. You simply do that with the brackets and give it 0. And then Ruby will understand that I wanted to give me only the element that is at the first index of the array. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see that I get apple. Now, you can also do that by accessing from the back. So you could actually say -1 or -2. And Ruby would understand that you want to access the last element of the array. And you can see that now we get cherries. Great. And what if I want to access several elements of this array? Let's say I want to access apple and orange. So you could actually give your array a range. So you could tell it, I want you to give me all the elements from 0 and stop at 2. So it would go at 0 and 1 and it would stop at 2. So it actually would not return cherries because it stops at cherries. And if we print that out, we should get apple and oranges. That's simple. Great. So that's awesome. And if we want to reassign an element of this array, it's also very simple. It works pretty much the same way as variables. So you would simply say that fruits index 0 is now equal to mango. And then if we would print fruits. So here we're printing fruits before reassigning it. We reassign it and then we print it again. And let's see if that works. And it does. You can see that first the index of 0 was apple, but then we changed the array and now the index of 0 is mango. So that's how we reassign arrays. And let's assume I would like to actually add something in that array. So there are several ways to do that. And you can simply give it here an index. So if I would give it, we have 0, 1, and 2. And if I would give it the index of 3, and say 3 is now equal to banana, and then we print out the whole array, we get banana, apple. Sorry, I just got a little confused because I had puts on the reassignment. So let's just rerun this. So we can see that now our array has actually 4 elements: apple, orange, cherries, like we defined at the beginning, and then it created a new index and gave it the value of banana. That's great. If this index existed, it would have just reassigned it. If the index doesn't exist, it just creates a new element for it. Now, what would happen if I would put 55, for example, and I would run that? And you can see that Ruby basically gave an empty value for all of the indexes between 3 and 55, and then assigned the 55 as banana. So all of those values are basically nil. They're just empty values, they're blank. And then we assign banana. Another way to insert something inside of a variable, inside of an array, is you have some keywords for Ruby. They are methods. We haven't covered methods really yet, so I don't want to deep dive into this. But a syntax that you might see is this. So basically this is saying take this value and push it inside of this array. And that by default just pushes it at the end of the array. So it just keeps following on the index. It doesn't create any empty values or anything. And of course, last, what we want to do with the array is remove something from it. So now I added banana, but actually I want to remove banana. So the way to do that is by calling a built-in Ruby method on the array, which is called delete at, and you can tell that method which index you actually want to delete. So if we would say -1, it would delete the last element of the array as we saw before. And so if we run this, we can see that we added banana, but then we removed it. So banana doesn't show anymore on our array. Great, so now that we've seen pretty much how to add, remove, and update the data from our array, let's maybe jump ahead and look at a few methods that you can use on arrays that are actually built in by Ruby. So one very common is just getting the length, so the size of the array, so how many elements it contains. So you can do that by doing length, and there are actually a lot of similar built-in methods which do exactly the same thing. So there is count and there is size, which basically return the same thing, just to let you know. But let's go ahead with count and print this out. And you can see that we get 3 because we have 3 elements inside of our array. Another one is called join. So we have an array of fruits, and when we print them out, they come as different elements, of course, because they are. But what if I want to take all of those elements and put them together? Now, you can do that by, say, calling the method join. And join, basically, so let's look what it does. It puts all of those elements together as one string. And that's great. And you can actually even give a argument to join and specify how you want to join all of those elements. So for example, I want to join all of those elements and separate them with a comma. And so if I run this, we get the same result, but now instead of all of them being just glued together, now they have a comma between each element. So that's for join. Another nice one is reverse, and basically just takes your array and reverses the order. And now you can see that cherry is the first and apple is the last. And another one which is quite important, it's called the include keyword. And fruits, if you call include on your fruits array, and then you ask it, does it include a specific value? And it will return true or false. So now I'm asking include if the array of fruits includes the word apple. And it does. We know that it does. So this should return true. And we need to print it out if we want it to return true. My bad. And now we see that it returns true. But if I would say apple without an E, we would get false. So this is how include works. And there's a lot of Ruby built-in methods for arrays and of course for anything else. And the best way to actually learn those is just going through the documentation. So you just go on Google, type Ruby doc and look at the array documentation, and there is a lot of built-in methods that will help you. Sometimes you will never use them, but sometimes they're just very helpful because it allows you just to like avoid writing code, right? Because you could actually write yourself a method that just gives you the length of an array, but why do that if Ruby already has it built in? So it's very important to go over the documentation and have an idea of what kind of methods are there for arrays. All right, guys, so that's it for this episode. Very short, I think. Hope it was okay. Sorry if it went fast. It's just that arrays are great and we are going to cover them over the upcoming episodes as well. So I'm not diving too deep into that one. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode.